Welcome to the Black Paper. My name is Ndukwe Onoha.
And I'm Cheta Wanze.
Cheta, do you have any plans for the summer?
I don't understand the question.
Do you have any plans for the summer?
We have a family get together in a couple of weeks. As you know, I have a lot of family members who are British and have been in the UK for years. Many of them were actually born in the UK. So we have a large family get together in a couple of weeks. And that's the only thing I have planned. And then I go back to work. I mean, I have to be in West Africa a bit more over the next few months. As you know, there are a couple of elections coming. So,
which is a nice tie-in. In fact, it's almost as if you read my mind, because I asked if you have any plans this summer, because your Daddy Farage, your most admired politician, has decided that this summer he wants to spend it arguing with a bin. And that is because he called a totally unnecessary by-election in order to try and sway people's eyes away from his pocket. Cheta, do you want to lead us into what this whole thing is about and why Nigel Farage might just find himself shouting at a bin?
I mean, it's hilarious, ridiculous, interesting, and it puts a So, you know, I've been saying for a while that Nigel Farage will never be prime minister, and it's interesting that it's not the reasons that I was trying to advance, as in that a lot of his supporters will suddenly grow sense and realize that he's a snake oil salesman and will not vote for him. It's the ridicule. There's something that a friend of mine used to say back in the day. He used to say that fascists, more than any other thing, they hate ridicule. Because look at Farage now. And I think being the British politician, I'll leave it to you to explain the quirks of how a dustbin is ending up on the ballot box in Clacton. But the bottom line is, when you have fascists or wannabe fascists, one thing that they cannot, that does them in, is when they begin to look ridiculous and when they begin to look weak. Farage was already looking pathetic when he called the by-election, when he did the whole resignation act and called it by-election. The other parties played a blinder immediately, led by our sister. So we have to give her props, because she was the first out of the gates to say, nope, that the Conservatives are not going to go along with this charade, and that they would not be running a candidate in Farage's by-election. And one by one, the last to come out to say that they will not be running a candidate in by-election were the Greats. But the person who issued a final statement, and it was a very devastating statement, was Rupert Lowe. Rupert Lowe said that Restore will run a candidate in the Clacton by-election. The proper by-election, not the comedy, not the circus. That's the word he used, not the circus that Farage has set up for this summer. Essentially, in between the lines of that was Farage is already guilty of whatever he's being accused of. So the Parliament is going to kick him out and force a by-election in Clacton towards the end of the year. That's what Rupert Lowe said in so many words. And it's opened the window for a certain Count Binface, who is an independent space warrior, to come out and say that he's going to run. Now, a quirk of the British system is to run in parliament, to run for parliament, you need £500 and 10 people to sign. That's 10 people who are residents in the constituency being fought over, to sign that yes, you can run for that election. So it's this Count Binface, real name Jonathan Harvey, who is a comedian by trade. So he's a real life comedian. And I was watching, because when the whole thing started, I began to take a lot of my after work time to watch. So I have really gorged on a lot of Count Binface mythology. He started out as Lord Buckethead. Lord Buckethead is it's from an episode of is it Star Wars or Star Trek or
No,
Doctor
no,
Who?
no, no, no. He's I think it's Doctor Who. So it was owned
Yeah.
by. It was created anyway by. We'll get to that. I'll remember.
Anyway,
Todd Donham. Or Durham.
yeah. So anyway, um he started out as Lord Buckethead. So the original Lord Buckethead was in another
Was in the 1984
was in
film by Todd Durham.
1980s.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in the
Yeah.
1980s. And so in the election that Theresa May called back in shortly after the Brexit vote, I think that was 2017, he stood against her as Lord Buckethead. But then the thing just caught fire. Then it was so John Oliver invited him over to they flew him first class to New York to come and perform in John Oliver's show and all of that. So the original Lord Buckethead now it became and this is something that people from our neck of the woods need to also we need to learn about things like copyright. It became a copyright issue. So he had to give up that identity, Lord Buckethead. And then he now came up with Count Binface. And since then, Count Binface has been in he ran against Boris Johnson. He ran against Liz Truss. He ran against Rishi Sunak, and he ran against Andy Bonham in all the elections. But of course, it was to everybody it was comic relief. Now with Farage, it has gotten real, and Farage is just incredibly unhappy about the whole thing. And he's beginning to lash out. And in lashing out, he's looking weak. And that is what is doing him in. Because among the rights, you don't look weak. For all of what Donald Trump does, Donald Trump, you have to give it to him. He never looks weak.
In fact, the one time Marco Rubio cracked it just a bit when he said calling him tiny hands, but he didn't go far enough. But that rattled Trump a bit. But to go back to the origin of this, I know that if you're listening, if you've been a listener to this podcast, we've alluded to it, or if you're following UK news, you definitely know what this is all about. So Nigel Farage, it was revealed initially by The Guardian that he had received £5 million that he's been trying very hard to explain the reason for from a Thai-based crypto billionaire, Richard was his name Harbon. Christopher Harbon. Mr. Chakrit. But ever since now, the rules of Parliament say that if you receive a gift over £300, I understand, in a year before you become in the year before you become an MP, you have to declare it. But not only did Mr. Farage receive this £5 million, for which he, on one hand, claims it was a gift, on the other hand, claims it was for security, but always says there's nothing to see here. There's not the man just gave him.
He's giving 27 different reasons for the gift
for it, but that's just not all. Then in this in the UK system, where if you in a credit-led society, credit-heavy society, where if you buy things outright, people are looking at you suspiciously. It turns out that Mr. Man has bought 5 houses cash, and he still can't explain how on earth. Because I think it was in before the 2024 election, he was there saying, "Look, I don't have any money. I'm skint. I'm broke." And then suddenly you're able to purchase all these houses. But as if that was not even enough, it also turns out that he's been funded by some guy called Post George, who's a criminal. He's done his time, but was just there lavishly.
Don't they rehabilitate people in your books?
Well, see, but you see, that's an interesting thing, because in calling Post George a criminal, I'm actually using what the press has called him, and that is, I think, one of the biggest reasons why Farage 3 is toys out of the pram. Because not only have these allegations or these dealings come to light. But the latest ones have been brought to light by the Sunday Times, which in no stretch of the imagination is a left-wing or labor-loving newspaper. However, something has happened in the right-wing press where they've suddenly said, this guy, you're messing about too much. And suddenly they've started asking him questions and he's getting way, way, way upset. And which then led ultimately to him being referred to the Parliamentary Standards Committee to look into whether he should have declared this £5 million that he received from his crypto sugar daddy in Thailand. Now, Farage, knowing fully well, because the man might be despicable or whatever, but he's also not a fool. Knowing fully well that the Standard Committee will most likely find against him, and if the committee finds against him, they can either demand he gives a written apology, they can suspend him from Parliament, or they can expel him from Parliament. If they suspend him from Parliament for more than 9 days or 10 days, that means it automatically triggers an option for his constituency to call for a recall. Now, if 10% of the people in his constituency sign that recall petition, then there will be an automatic by-election. Now, what Farage has done, which is on one hand is a publicity stunt, but on the other hand is a stupid thing. However, our people say that when the gods want to destroy you, they first drive you mad. What he then did was to say, you know what, I'm going to stand down. And in standing down as an MP, there will definitely be a by-election. But guess what? I'm going to stand again in that by-election. And his calculation was simple. In the 2024 election, he won with 46% of the votes. So his calculation was, well, I'm going to show that people still love me and that my constituency still thinks I'm the shit. So I'm going to stand, and then every other person will feel their candidates and I will beat them. But the thing is, as Cheta said earlier, everyone just said, nope, we're having none of this.
I want to hear you give Sister Kemi her flowers.
Oh no, wait, look, I think if there's one thing which is a strength and sometimes a minus for Kemi, is that she says it as it comes to her head. So immediately she just went out and said, "No, we're not feeding a candidate here," and that she was straight out of, and then of course Ed David, the Lib Dems, came out and said, "Yes, we're not doing that." It took Keir Starmer a while, and of course, sadly, at this point, I don't know if you noticed, Cheta, Keir Starmer said something, then Andy Bonham said something, because right now we sort of like have the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister in waiting. Yeah, So, but the thing is, in setting Farage up to be the lone candidate, it was like, at that point, it was still good. Things were still good because they could use the point that, oh, you know what, these guys, they are cowards. They are not standing against me. But then,
which is what Isabel Oakeshott tried to do.
Yeah, but then Count Binface came out, and suddenly, every single, from the BBC to LBC to Times, my man has
They've all interviewed
everywhere.
him.
They've all interviewed him. And Cheta, this is the problem. See, Farage is in a place now where it doesn't matter whether he wins or loses.
Or not.
He has lost, because he had 46% in 2024. So if he gets 45% in this one, the question is,
where did that 1% go?
You lost
shared 1% to a B.
You understand? If he wins by 90%, they'll be like, yes, Bean still took your 10%. But if he loses,
if he loses, he's done.
Because the joke will be, you lost with joke.
And he will, if he loses, he will not, even the right-wing guys in the US that support him, that give him, everybody will just hang him out to dry. Chakrit will leave him alone, straight up. Like,
but do you know why I think he might lose to Buckethead or Count Binface? If you look at because you mentioned Binface's electoral record since he stood against Theresa May, and since he started with Boris Johnson, May and then Boris Johnson, And I looked into the figures. In 2019, he got, against Boris Johnson, 69 votes. In 2021, 92,896 votes against in the 2021 London mayoral election. However, it's not just because, again, people hear 92,000 and they'll be like, no, those elections are in millions. But what lies beneath that number is that he beat UKIP and PS Corbyn. Now, UKIP was Farage's old party. In 2024, when he in the London mayor election, he beat Britain first. Yeah, I stood again, but he in that he got 24,000 votes in that, but he beat Britain first. So the interesting thing is this: apart from the Makerfield election, when he has stood against the other iteration of the far right and Farage, he has beat them. So if you look at just his fortune in standing against the far right, he has form in putting up a good fight against them. So and there's been a poll. I'm coming.
Yeah, go on.
There's been a few polls, and even though this is national, so they're not Clacton specific, but 60% of the public say Farage has not been honest about his finances. The interesting one, Ipsos poll, 33% of Britons prefer Count Binface, to win. Over 21% that say Farage should win. So the thing is, even though Farage is expected to win in Clacton, Count Binface has captured the imagination of the nation. And if he gets anything less than 46%, he has lost, because he lost to a joke character. And that he will never live that down.
Yeah. So the Mirror took a camera, went into Clacton, and quite a number of the people who they spoke with said that as in they were very unhappy with Farage, but they still said that they will vote for him. So I think I would disagree with you a bit that he would lose. I'm not going to discount the possibility. It is very possible that he would indeed lose. But I think it was important to just point out that the Mirror went to, and I think that was 4 days ago, the Mirror went to Clacton and interviewed people, I think 8 people or so from the street, and only one person said that they would vote for the Bin.
Oh no, so I'm not saying that. I've said that Farage will most likely win. However, the biggest thing for him is he needs to maintain over 46%. But even in doing that, the thing is, I mean, like Richard Reeve said, he's spending his summer arguing with the Bin.
Yeah.
And in the improbable world that he loses, who's going to stand out? He will need a by-election to come back, because what's his name? Robert Jenrick is seeing himself as a next leader of reform. Zia, so if he loses, he's done for. So he can't afford to lose.
Yeah,
if not, they'll kick him out of his own
Robert
party.
Jenrick is already sniping at his heels. It's that's clear to me. Robert Jenrick already sees himself as the next leader of reform.
But anyway, I mean, I just thought if there was any news, any good news in these past few days, I think it's just the fact that Farage has made himself a laughing stock of any.
Yeah, he's removed himself from contention.
He has.
So for us, from our community, in my view, it gives us some breathing room, because the person Robert Jenrick will not be able to step into Farage's shoes in reform, because if by some chance he becomes a leader of reform, he's too spiteful, so he can't command the kind of followership. That's one thing that you give Farage. Whether he came up this from the funny man angle or whatever, he had charisma. I think that the shine is being taken off his charisma at the moment, but for a very long time he had charisma. Rupert Lowe has the same kind of charisma as Keir Starmer. He doesn't inspire anyone. Robert Jenrick, too spiteful. Richard Tice, same WhatsApp group as Rupert Lowe and Keir Starmer. So I don't see in the
Zia
immediate
Yusuf is just
future.
a hateful
No,
human being.
no, Zia Yusuf is the wrong ethnicity. They will not follow him.
Yeah, well,
So
true that.
yeah, so I don't see anybody in the near future that can really take the place. I mean, there's room for another demagogue to emerge. The fact that Farage, that we are witnessing the fall of Farage in real time, does not mean that that the ideas that he has fertilized will just wither and die. They are still
And
there, but it
and
buys us time
mm,
to regroup.
and the thing is, I mean, I was just thinking about. I know we were talking about it earlier. Witnessing the fall of Farage in real time, and the rise of, I mean, in a few days or in just over a week, and Bonham will walk in, will be crowned as the new prime minister. The rise of Bonham on one hand, the fall of Farage on the other hand, and when you look at the tone of the conversation now from Shabana Mahmood around immigration and trying to soften. No, no, I'm guessing I'm trying to soften
I'm
her
just
stance on immigration.
I'm very bored of. So
No, no, hang
what's
on, Cheta. So,
okay?
so in trying to soften her stance on immigration, at the same time the Farage is falling. So, are we seeing a point where it seems that, unlike in the past, where Labour seem to have actively been chasing after reform and their policies, now Farage is old news. Now his shine has gone off, and suddenly we can start having a more nuanced, more sensible conversation around immigration. Or am I just drawing different lines
I mean,
together?
the possibility exists, but here's my view. What this shows, the fact, so it shows that a lot of the anti-immigration behavior from the Labour Party was driven by Keir Starmer himself. It shows that
So you don't think it was them chasing reform?
it was him chasing reform, but for him to be able to chase reform, he needed to believe it at some level. Shabana Mahmood, it shows that Shabana Mahmood is does not have any principles. So she believes that Andy Bonham is going to be less hostile to immigrants, less hostile to people. So because of that, she's stacking towards the right. She's the kind of person who will, if by some chance a reform government comes into power and she's appointed, she will suddenly become very, very, as in incredibly harsh on immigrants. And I think that speaks to a deeper problem of a lack of principles within the system. I think that, and this is not just a UK problem, it's a problem across the entire Western world. It's something that we've talked about repeatedly on this podcast. Politicians no longer do things out of conviction, out of any real conviction. Again, I think it's important to exempt people from the far right and from the far left. Those still do things with conviction, but many of the so-called centrist politicians no longer do stuff with conviction. They just look at the polls and make their decisions based on what they think is the flavor of the month. And that is a problem for everyone. It's a real problem for everybody.
And I agree with you, and that's because being a local councillor, when I look at some of the things that are being directed at me or even my party online, or especially on Facebook, you are sometimes drawn into this sense that, my goodness, this is how everyone thinks. So if you take that as some form of poll, you get to think that that's how the world works, or that's how the world thinks. But then I go out door knocking and I meet people and I'm like, it is a different conversation altogether. And I have to constantly remind myself and remind my colleagues that, look, Facebook is not the real world. Online is not the real world. If you're looking at just polls and some of the chatter out there and the algorithm, you will get sucked into this place where you're trying to chase after some likes and approval online, and
Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe.
and you end up ditching your principles because you think that whatever chatter is happening online represents the whole of society. And on that happy note, Cheta, let's go for a break, and when we come back, we'll speak about more somber issues. Welcome back to the Black Paper. My name is Ndukwe Onoha.
And I'm Cheta Wanze.
Cheta, there's a piece of news that has gripped our community over the past few days, and that's the case of this man known as Ndodana Mkanyisi Shuma. And apologies to the Zimbos out there. I am definitely sure I have not pronounced that name properly. But Ndodana is a 45-year-old British citizen of Zimbabwean heritage who is also called Mark, who, as it has been revealed now, murdered his, or allegedly, because it's a live case and we have to use the right terms, but allegedly murdered his wife and 2 children, fled the UK to South Africa, has been arrested now in South Africa, stood trial today, and is awaiting extradition to the UK to face the crimes for which he's being accused. It's a sad story,
It's a very sad story.
And I know that what happens most times when these sort of stories come up in our communities, the first thing we want to do is to shy away from it, or to say, look, there's nothing to see here, look the other way. However, and I'm being very careful, and we have to be very careful because, as I said, this is a live investigation. However, being a counselor, there are stories that I hear, there are conversations that I'm privy to that just gets me worried about the state of affairs in our community. And I just wonder if we would not see, maybe not something as extreme as this becoming more prevalent, but at least something close to this. There's a lot of, for lack of a better phrase, I'll say, unhappiness and disquiet going on in the community. And we just thought we'll talk about this here and see how we can speak to you guys and say, please, whatever is going on, we can't speak to the motives behind this incident, but the thing is, seek help. I don't know if you want to say something about that, Chita.
Well, I think the first thing I would say is God rest the dead. The 3 women who were killed were Notabos Landiles Shuma, his wife, his 2 daughters. So she was 42, and she was a highly accomplished lady. She was involved. She was in the financial sector, and she was I think from what I read somewhere, she was the only female fraud expert at a particular kind of financial fraud in the UK. So they lived in a 1.3 million pounds home in Bedford, which is in an affluent part of Bedford. And it appears, again, this is, I saw an interview given by some of her friends on ITV. Was it ITV or Channel 4? It's one of the two. So a lot of what I'm saying comes from that. It appears that the marriage was in some trouble because the allegation is that because the financial power has shifted towards her, towards Zandile, the Ndodana became resentful, and there was talk of divorce. The 2 daughters, Natalie aged 15 and Nala aged 5, were both killed as well. They were both murdered. Based on stories that I've heard in the past, and this thing used to be quite common in among the Nigerian community back in the US. Let me not say quite common because that would be making it, but there were more than a few stories of people in the Nigerian community in the US where the man essentially brought the wife over from Nigeria, quote unquote, trained her, and then as she found her foot, he started to become resentful of her success. It's for me, and if you take a cursory look at social media, especially Elon's armpits, you will see a lot of stories about Nigerian couples who left Nigeria and are in the UK. We talked about the story of what's his name, He hired the tech guy a couple of episodes ago. Yeah, and then they get to the UK and suddenly the marriage falls apart. I think that's something that requires a lot of reflection um in the community about why is it that marriages that seem to be doing well, or that a disproportionate number of marriages that seem to be doing well in Nigeria or in Africa gets here and suddenly things fall apart. And at first, it's something that needs deeper reflection, but at first glance, the first thing that comes to my head really is the patriarchy. Um, in our neck of the woods, and this is pretty much general around Africa, the man's roles are clearly defined, the woman's roles are clearly defined. And many men, when they make the move to this part of the world, they can't make that adjustment. They still expect their wives to come home. I mean, in this part of the world, everybody has to contribute. It's that simple. Everybody has to contribute to this because the incomes are such that it's very difficult for one person to bear the burden alone. Even if you are earning six figures, it's difficult unless you are earning the very high six figures. But if you're earning between 100 and 150, it's still very difficult for you to carry the burden alone. So everybody has to contribute, and it's actually not nice to expect your wife to, after working in the city, which is a high pressure job, then to come and then you throw your legs up and be expecting to be served dinner. We are not, Charlie, we don't come out Africa. So behave yourself. I mean, there's also that social pressure. There's a friend of mine who had to clear his family, as it were, because some of his relatives came to visit from Nigeria. They saw him in the kitchen helping his wife do the dishes. And the next thing, they started complaining that she was a bad wife. How can our brother be doing kitchen work and all that? And he cleared them straight. And it's just a very, very tiny thing would have made him walk them out of his house. But he made it very clear to them that
in which case it would have also been the woman's fault. No, I mean
in which case it would have also been a woman's fault. But he made it very clear that he didn't care, because that's a part of the problem, a part of the issue in many of these kind of cases is that the men are very concerned about what will be said when they go to Umuna meeting back home. You understand? They don't want to be demand, quote and unquote, in the presence of their village people. So because of that, they are trying to live up to a reputation or to an ideal that is no longer realistic. So back to this case, back to the case of the Schumers, the very unfortunate case of the Schumers. She was working in a that's in the city, and then he was running a small business from the house, a property business. So he was selling property, and I think she had a stable income. He did not. And it is entirely possible. This is now me speculating. It is entirely what I'm speculating based on the interview that I watched. It's entirely possible that he really, really began to resent her success and did not know how to handle it. At the end of the day, you just need to learn to adjust. And this is a message to all of us, to men in our community. You need to learn to adjust to new realities. It's a partnership. You did not marry you did not marry a maid. It's supposed to be a partnership.
And first of all, kudos to your friend, because when I hear stories like that, I'm really impressed on one hand, and also proud of people who can stand up and say, "Hang on, this is my family. These are my rules. However you do things, go away." But the other thing, you touched on something earlier, and I think it's good to sort of like put some thought on it. I've also wondered, when people say, "Oh, well, marriages were working well in Nigeria," then you suddenly come here, and it seems that things fall apart. but I always push back and say, well, were they really working well in Nigeria, or did we live in a bubble? And Nigeria, Ghana, Zimbabwe, wherever. But in our, when you go back home to, Africa, were they necessarily working in quote well, or were you in such a bubble that you had to just keeping up with the Joneses, keep up appearances, so that if you're a Christian, pastor will not call you people and say, "Oh, what's going on," or so that because there was always some form of check and balance to whom you had to appear as if everything was okay. But then you come here where the pastor doesn't have your phone number, no one is looking at you anymore, and suddenly you don't feel that restraint, or you don't feel that weight of having to keep up appearances for anyone or to get any approval from anyone, and then you are then faced, you are left with the real emotions, or the real with the stark reality of all these things you could say, you had wanted to say, but you did not want your father or your father-in-law to get into this business and set you right. So it takes me back to that question, were things really okay, or were a lot of people just pretending? That's one. But two, the other thing um you've said about having to change perspective, but I'll say we need to also reorientate ourselves, our minds, whether you're a man, whether you're a woman. This place will, for lack of a better phrase, will test you because of the pressures, because of the change in culture, uh, because you have no immediate family or extended family to lay back on, to take on some of the burdens. Suddenly you find yourself, you're the nanny, you're the cook, you're everything, you're doing, and this, there are no specific or clear-cut gender roles in quotes as we have back home. Suddenly you are tested. It is okay, as the saying goes, to not be okay, but when that happens, seek help. Again, the one thing that this society affords is the ability to go and chat, to say to someone, I'm struggling with my mental health, to say to a professional, I need help. And no one is telling you, right, before I can talk to you, bring uh 500 pounds or whatever. There are
The head of
charities
live
that
goats.
yeah, there are charities that they get funding from local authorities, from the central government, from individuals, from companies, to help people um, go through some of these challenges. It is never, you can never be alone, really. If you're intentional about seeking help about some of these issues. So I don't, it's as I said, Cheta, as a counselor, there are things there are conversations I'm brought into, and I'm like, my goodness, things are bad. But the only thing I can, if you have to go to a different place where no one knows you, because it's also, we still carry that stigma. Oh, they will see me, and they will say, oh, even this person, I thought you were doing well. If you have to go to a different city, if you have to, in fact, you can get help online these days. There, if you have to do that, please do that. But to get to the place where, for whatever reason, we don't know this story, we don't know what has happened, but to murder your own family is, there's no going back from that. A 5-year-old
Yeah.
girl, a 15-year-old girl, you can't go back from that. Yeah,
I mean,
that's
in all honesty, and at the risk of prejudicing uh, um, an ongoing investigation, so his behavior for me um uh, uh, rendered him in my head, when the fact that he escaped first to Zimbabwe,
mm,
um, which has no extradition treaty with the UK. So he could have easily just stayed in Zimbabwe and banned there, and would have just disappeared there. But to quote what you said with respect to the Farage discussion, those the gods want to destroy, the first make mad.
mm,
He probably, Zimbabwe, by all Western accounts, is not the um, is not the easiest place to settle in if
mm,
you've been living in a 1.3 million pound mansion in Bedford.
mm,
So he found his way to South Africa, and that was where he got caught. When I heard that, the first thing that came to my head was they don't catch am for Africa. Make UK no ask for extradition straight away. Make they keep am first. Make they beat am. That was the first thing that came to my mind, because pretty much, especially for the two girls who have not started life, what he is alleged to have done is pretty unforgivable.
True that. Well, anyway, as you said, Cheta, God rest the dead. And for those who are having issues, and I know there are, quite a number, please seek professional help. Talk to someone before you get to the point where an extradition battle will be the least of your problems. But anyway,
Yeah,
Cheta, I think that's a pretty decent
great.
place to leave it. Yeah. I don't know if you have any other thing to say, or
No, I
otherwise
don't. Just talking about this story has dampened my mood.
well, didn't mean to do that, but hey, it's what it is.
It had to be mentioned. It had to be talked
Mm.
about.
All right,
I
Mom.
really hope that our people would behave better.
Well, to just it's almost the summer holidays, and I know some places have already started. If you have kids, I know that there are places where you can go and either restaurants or hotels with breakfast options where kids eat free. If your kids are under 16, the adult just has to buy food and drink, and then so if not that is so much of a ray of sunshine, but I just thought it would be too sad to end on a really grim note.
Noted. I mean, eh, yeah. It's important to find something for the kids to do. During the long holiday, 6 weeks. I always wonder what they do in places like the US where it's 12, but that's not our problem right now.
It's not. Our problem right now is to end this episode on time, so that we don't take too much liberty. What do you think, Cheta? See you at the next one.
See you at the next one.